Hey everybody, welcome to what we've been calling the recap episode. But I do think, Pat, that we need to do a little bit of a rebrand here. These are more reaction videos because I I don't want to really recap what happened. I want you to go and listen to it. And it's hard to recap such
Yeah.
a riveting conversation. You may
Yes, that's what it is. It's hard to recap all of the details that are said in our podcasts. It's more we're so flummoxed by what's happening that we are telling it like it is on this show. There it is.
exactly. And you may have noticed that we are missing someone today. My cat is no longer on the printer. He is upstairs. So we're sorry about that. Oh, and of course, Lynn Price Robbins, Dr. Lynn Price Robbins.
Dr. Lynn Price Robbins is will not be joining us today. She was so incredibly wowed by the episode that she just needed some time to herself to just recover from re-listening to the interview she was a part of.
That's exactly 100% correct.
All
Um,
right,
so let's get into it.
reactions are for the boys.
Re-
That's what it'll be this week.
Perfect. Can we add that to the title somewhere?
Yeah.
Reactions are for the boys. I love it. So let's get into it because my first reaction was personal. In the
Okay.
opening of the show, Bruce and Isaac and Lynn were talking about how Washington really saw himself as a farmer. Okay, he's so many different things, president and general. We know him as all these different things, but he saw himself as a general and I mean as a farmer. And the reason why I could relate to that is because there are a few things that I just love doing when I have the time. I love building stuff out of wood. Baking is a new thing for me, playing instruments. And like life is the stuff that pulls me away from wanting to just get back to doing that. So I'm like, okay, I have to take care of my daughter. I have to, go to work. I have to do all this stuff. When I'm done all that, I can finally go back to continue to build that thing I'm trying to build in the backyard.
Right.
And so it was just so relatable because I'm like, that's kind of how I saw Washington was in my mind was like, all right, fine. I'll be president. But when I'm done, then will I have time to be a farmer again? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. That profound sense of this isn't necessarily what I want to be doing, and we know for a fact that Washington didn't want to be president and really was really close to not wanting to be president. Well, no, not being president for a second term, mainly because he didn't want and to retire and be a farmer uh, sounds like that based on what Bruce said, that's kind of where he just wanted to be, just exist as that. So are you a carpenter? Would we call you a carpenter? Would we call you a musician? Because at least Washington, you sound kind of like Downey Jr. from Tropic Thunder right now, where it's like you're not sure who you are, right? Like, so which one would you be?
you know, I'm glad you called me out on that because I also had that thought, which is Washington considered himself that. I don't consider myself any of those things. I mean, I consider myself a filmmaker, I suppose. But interesting thing when you make something you love doing your profession, then you need
Yeah,
to find other things you love doing. So I guess that's what it is for me. Interesting for
100%.
Washington,
Yeah,
maybe, and I wish Lynn was here to confirm this, but maybe he studied for a very long time to be a general, read books and all that, and then when he was doing that, he's like, okay, what's the next thing? I
it would be a lot better just playing with dirt.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah, and like so, it's funny you bring that up because like one of the things that stuck out to me, especially early in the episode, was in him farming was that again, it's I don't know about you, but for me personally, it's like I always look at the colonies and that time period as such a small peanuts kind of thing, where it's like people would trade leather for some beans and corn, and then they'd go home, and that was it. And it's like he actually was testing different crops. He was kind of at the forefront, um, and we'll get into it, but also like in a kind of a much darker way at the forefront of farming. And we will acknowledge it because that is what history is. It's not all bright and sunshine. Like sometimes there are darker things, and we'll get to it. Reaction teaser was that he was switching to American wheat because he originally started as tobacco, and then he switched to American wheat, and it was because he was trying to reposition himself based on the global market,
Mm-hmm.
which was like, it sounds like he's talking or selling things at Wall Street. Like, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Trading Places.
I love that movie. Yeah.
One of my favorites. Yeah, it's a Christmas movie. I don't care what anyone says. It's a Christmas movie. It's a holiday movie, I guess.
Because it
better,
takes
'cause
place during that time period. Yeah.
yes,
Sure.
yeah. Dan Aykroyd as Santa makes it a Christmas movie.
Okay.
Yeah. But like, the whole crux of that is like frozen oranges, right? And it's like that's what he was doing. So I thought that was really cool. As far as the oh yeah, it is a global, like he wasn't just a farmer though, right? Like it's not like he just had like a tomato garden in the back.
Right.
It was like he wanted to be almost like an agriculturalist or a capitalist.
It's a big
farmer.
deal to
I don't
him.
know.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
actually feels like it tapped into two facets of his personality for me. Like, one, as mentioned in the episode, and we've mentioned before, like he was aware of his place in history, right? He saved everything. He wrote everything down. He knew that he
Yeah.
was creating a historical record, and so he understood this grander sense of himself, the world, time. I'm inferring here, but really that's kind of how I view that with the glory of hindsight here. And so it's like everything he did, nothing he did was small. Everything he did was like this grand, like
Yeah.
world market, the future of humanity. So that's one. The second facet, and this has come up a number of times, and boy, leave in the comments if you want to see this because this has come up a number of times. I really want to make something like this. Is how interested Washington was in technology, gadgetry, like future tech, so to speak. And there's a lot of it, from how he did his fireplaces to his experimenting with different soils and all that. Really super cool stuff. He was a gadget guy,
Yeah.
and it was interesting to see that or to hear that he was doing that with farming techniques, for better or for
Yeah.
worse.
Yeah. And I mean, if you go to Mount Vernon, shout out Mount Vernon. Like the estate of Mount Vernon is like shouting out specifically that entity. They have is it the 12-sided barn?
No, it's like 16 sided barns.
16-sided barn?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like crazy doodads and things. As we speak, and definitely correct. That doodad is actually Latin for 16-sided barn.
Yeah, that's funny. I used to speak Latin, and that is correct.
So that's why you understood me.
Yeah.
Perfect. Great.
Exactly.
Man, we need Lynn.
That's-
Get her back. Get her back now.
Well, so what they would do is they would put hay and seeded seeds and all that on top. The
Mhm.
horses would trample around in a circle, and it would fall through slats in the ground, separating the yeah. Something.
No,
like
it's
that.
really cool.
It was cool.
Yeah. So something I do want to bring up, this episode is also heavy, right? Like we get a side of Washington that I think it just goes to show people aren't one thing, right? No one is one thing. And sure, not general, not a farmer, or like not just a farmer, not just a general, not just a president, all of those things. But also his relationship to slavery is a lot more complicated and unclear. I think in some ways it's more clear, and in a bad way, based on the conversation that Bruce had, especially with like him trying to find, speaking of experimenting, not necessarily on people, right? Like it's not that nefarious, but the idea of creating different agricultural systems with enslaved people, right? And initially wanting that system to be more dependent on slave labor, which I guess in like a very immoral way makes sense as far as like, hey, you're making product with no money, right? No expense. But then wanting to end or get rid of the institution of slavery once it failed, once his tests failed. Um, and like,
Selfish.
yeah, that's a really big bummer.
Yeah, to say
If
the least. Yeah.
if I'm being
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's not what I expected.
I think Isaac said it in another episode. We touch on it in our series that'll be coming out, that it's hard to reconcile both of those things,
Yeah,
meaning that we idealize Washington in some regard. We,
in many
in
regards, yeah,
many regards, there's clairvoyance to the decisions that he makes for the independence of this country and what he's fighting for. And then there's this equally large and opposite thing that is impossible to grapple. And it is why Washington is a complicated figure. And please don't quote me on this because I am not the historian, but um, I believe that what it was in part was that Washington understood that enslaved people were people and that it was wrong, but that the economy was built up around this such that it wasn't going to be fixed in his lifetime because there was a whole cascade of effect that would happen if you just abolished it. For example, having
sure,
society deal with individuals who don't have land or a means to make money or a place to live, and also our dollar doesn't go as far because we're so used to getting XYZ for free. And rather than
sure,
take the time, no, rather than having his beliefs that people are people outweigh the any other problem that comes after that, he allowed the global impacts of the abolition to affect him. I believe, not that that's a
sure. And look,
justification.
there's yeah, and there's a lot of interpretations in a lot of different ways. You know, it can be his relationship to it in particular has been, I think, interpreted based on the historians we've talked to. You know, there's you can't just say someone's free, not give them shelter, food, a job. And those definitely weren't on the table for enslaved Americans or freed Americans, especially, Black Americans who were emancipated, right? Like it's not like they had places they could go buy things. The system of slavery and racism was still in place. And it's not like you say you're free and someone just gets to do it. And he did feel there was a responsibility there. I will say he is a very contradictory person in that, especially like, man, and the bombshell, by the way, of him trying to move his enslaved people west, and then and hear me out, because I'm actually going to take the opposite approach. I'm going to say he was more aware of it and more exploitative than what you're saying. Like, yes, the good in me wants him to be the guy, right? That wasn't supporting it. However, this bombshell that Bruce drops, wanting to move his enslaved people west to continue essentially developing land, and then knowing that Washington had two wills, one that got burned and one that didn't. I am and Bruce brings this up. He talks about how the terms of his will would have been way more contradictory because he did want to emancipate and free all of his enslaved people, um, with the caveat of it was when his wife has passed away, and she was not great in regards to that side of things. But it's just so interesting because it was such a contradiction, and so you have to wonder what was in that other side of the will. Was it like he was like, institutions aren't working, burn it, free them,
Right.
like, and I said that probably too much in a joking manner.
No, but
Dying
it's a tough
Washington, but it is, yeah, right. Like
it's a tough subject matter.
it's really interesting,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, and again, the hardest part is just trying to marry those two images of Washington together to make up
Yeah,
this one person. And pa- part of us, none of this is an excuse, but part of this is having to understand the context of the time. Not an excuse in the least, but I think it's an aspect of trying to understand Washington. Now there were
sure. So, and before we, yeah, I guess because now it's like, well, if you listen to our episode with Bertrand van Roomsbeck, it's like they're asking people about colonialism and slavery at the same time, and the French are writing that it's bad and it's not good, and we're killing indigenous people in the U.S. So like,
so that's
it
not an
was an
excuse.
accepted
It's
evil.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was a known evil. It was just accepted more regularly. But we also don't have to like agree with that decision. We can be angry and mad and disappointed in those things.
And I think that's exactly where I rest these days, which is like, and that's why we're doing a show. It's like you don't ignore those things. Spoilies. We have an episode coming out that very much focuses on that aspect of Washington. We do not want to sweep any of that under the rug, but there are also things to
In
admire.
regards to the docuseries,
Docu-series, yeah.
yeah, that'll be coming out at a different time. So don't worry.
Coming
Don't hold your breath for that. Just this second,
right.
it will be. It's on its way.
It's a,
We'll give way more notice. But
yeah.
as far as the Too Complicated podcast, there is not an additional episode, at least currently.
Not yet. No, but I meant
Yeah.
the docu-series, and that is not something we shy away from, but we also talk about these other aspects of Washington. The other thing that you made me think of is how in some ways we haven't changed. Now hold on, hear me out. You were saying that if we freed everyone, we would then need to find a place to house them and give them work and so on and so forth. And the first thing that I thought of, and this is going to turn this into a much longer thing, so I just want to mention it and we'll batten down the hatches after that, is I think about veterans and
Yeah.
what happens when they come back and they've got issues. They're homeless now by and large, or to a certain degree, and we don't do anything for them, or maybe we try, but we certainly don't do enough. So
I would say the institutions around them are not supporting them in the ways that they should.
that they should.
Because I don't want to say the we as a general, because there are a lot of people really fighting and advocating.
Of course.
Yeah, no,
I'm
no.
just thinking.
I just to clarify, we don't. I don't want to make a general, like an overgeneralization. But yes, by and large, we are failing veterans.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. And the point that I'm making is we can say about hindsight, that's what they should have done. They should have just, it would have been a pain in the butt for them, but it was worth it. And I'm like, we can't even do that 250 years later. Create a good system. Like, could they have really created a good system? It would have been horrible no matter how you look at it. That would have arguably been, not arguably, that would have absolutely been better than slavery, of course. But
Yes,
it's just sad either way. Is really what
it's
I'm
tough,
about it.
and I think it's just. I think we can, before we get too far down the into the abyss of human failure.
Yeah.
I think it's just important that we both, we all agree, especially on our team here at Primary Source and Too Complicated, and we don't shy away from history. We don't shy away from the bad, right? We acknowledge it. We try and learn from it, and that's what you have to do. And things are more than one thing. Nothing is all good. Nothing is all bad.
It's complicated.
Slavery is all bad.
Yeah.
Let me rephrase. Slavery, all bad.
Right.
And it's evil, and we still admire Washington in many ways, but we also acknowledge his failures as a human.
Well, and I think
You
that's
know,
the purpose
yeah,
of the show is to educate and use
yeah.
primary sources to do that. Here's what Washington said on the matter. I am not coming to the conclusion. I'm
Here's
not
what Washington
speculating.
said, wrote it in a letter, then cut it, and then hid it somewhere that
Right.
he thought it was going to get burned later.
Right. Exactly.
Crazy, man. Yeah,
Uh,
it's
Unbelievable. It's tough to talk about. I feel super unqualified to have a more in depth version of this conversation. So
this is why we are reacting.
yes, yes. Well, I'm trying to relate to the entire audience from one perspective or another, and
Sure.
I really think there's something crucial here. Let me conclude with this.
Yeah.
The crucial takeaway from all of this is to do the research, is to make sure that when evidence is presented, it is coming from a primary source, meaning something in Washington's handwriting or someone who was present, or at least more present than, let's say, an author from 200 years later.
Yeah.
I know Bruce does an incredible job of researching and finding primary
Yeah.
sources. So check out his book, Washington at the Plow, which talks about Washington the farmer, but you obviously can't separate
Yeah.
one from the other. So please read it. It's fantastic, and Bruce is
Yeah.
an amazing guest.
Amazing guest, amazing author. He was fantastic. Be sure to check out all of our stuff at 2c4hpod.com. Check out our YouTube channel, 2c4h, or at YouTube _2c4h. Oh God, I'll put it in the show notes. Actually, you'll be watching this on the YouTube channel, so that's where it is. Also, check out our premium stuff over at intohistory.com/2c4h. They got a ton of great shows over there, including us. You can listen to it. And you can chat with us on Discord. You can let us know about your reactions to the episode. We got a lot of stuff in the works. And one last thing, we have some new shows coming out very soon. Keep an eye out for maybe something a little spooky Friday the 13th. So that's all I'll say for now. And it might be a limited run of something, or maybe something that will go on longer depending on how things are. So we appreciate all of you listening. Yeah,
have a great.
I think that's it. Anything else you want to plug?
No, I'm just super excited about what's happening Friday, October 13th. I mean,
yeah. Oh, actually, we have a new website up, primarysourcemedia.com. Check it out. Looks great.
awesome.
Yeah, go check out our stuff. All right.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
See you again soon, Friday, October 13th. Woo! Bye, y'all.